Okay. Thank you very much, Sido. Thank you all for having me here. I feel I have this special responsibility, since it's the last session of the 2 week workshop. So, my name is Maria Varaki. I'm a Greek lawyer, currently based in Helsinki at the Eric Castren Institute of International Law and Human Rights. I'm working on Aristotelian ethics of virtue ethics, of global leadership, although I'm a lawyer. And I'm very happy to be back in Haifa. Thank you very much for the invitation, Ido and Michal. And the topic I suggested to Ido regarding my last talk is the semiotics of uniform, basically, which is something very new for me. And I know it's cliche. Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, I'm at the very early stage," but I am at the very early stage. I mean it. Of something that I think it's very interesting for me, at least, but unfortunately I cannot develop fully now. But it's something that it's on my list, to be developed during the summer. So, what are the semiotics of uniform? On December 24, 2017, under the state of emergency in Turkey, we have a new executive presidential decree, not degree, saying basically that all defendants, who are currently detained and they are accused of the coup d'etat, the attempt of the coup d'etat, or terrorism in general, they have to wear a uniform when they appear before the court. So they cannot appear before the court in their civilian clothes. Okay? And I started thinking about the uniform thing. And I thought, how can I approach it? I'm a lawyer, I'm a legal scholar, I'm interested in theory, in philosophy, but I'm also a human being, which is more than a lawyer. How can I approach that? One way is to approach it via dignity. Something that we read a lot on Professor Waldron's, Jeremy Waldron's ideas about human dignity, and especially all his writings, which are great, especially after September 11th, when we saw the so-called war on terror, and the consequences. But I thought that this was not a way that I would like to approach this question of the uniform, especially in the era of, and I'm very happy that Alexandra was just before me about the digital visualization, especially in the era where we have a painting, we have a view, we have an image, and immediately that goes everywhere. And then we have this boom. You don't control the photo. You don't control the view. Things take place online. So what do you do with that? And what is the reaction? I have to say that I will give you a little bit of the historical background. Emre, correct me if I'm wrong in any of the facts that I give. How was that triggered in Turkey? Apparently, one of the defendants who appeared before one of the courts, in July, I think, 2017, one of the defendants accused of being member of the FETU group wore a T-shirt saying "hero." Okay, so he wore this T-shirt, hero, and he appeared before the court. And of course, that was massively published, all the media, and that triggered an outcry, triggered reaction. There were some people after that who wore this T-shirt, also hero. They were also detained themselves for wearing the T-shirt saying hero. And this is what the trigger, the reaction by President Erdogan. Who say we will not allow anyone else, to walk in, to appear before the court with civilian clothes. They cannot wear whatever they want. We will tell them what they are going to want. So basically on 24th of December 2017, just a day before Christmas, we have this executive presidential decree which says that all suspects and convicts under arrest, so okay, we have suspects as well, for crimes against the constitutional order and for violation of the anti-terror laws in Turkey, will have to wear single-type uniforms during court appearances. And we have two types of uniforms. We have the brown uniform, or it's called the almond uniform, and we have the gray uniform. So the brown jumpsuits will be worn by those attempting to abolish the order of the Turkish constitution by using by using force and violence to replace the order with another one, or to prevent the implementation of the order, and attempting to undermine the Turkish government by using force and violence, or prevent it from performing its duty partially or completely. The grey jumpsuits will be worn by those who attempt to undermine the Turkish Grand National Assembly or prevent it from performing its duty partially or completely, armed rebellion against the Turkish government, assassination of and assault on the president, crimes against the security of the state, and crimes against the constitutional order. So we have two separate groups, the brown and the gray. Don't ask me how is that. One apparently just for those who are considered to be allegedly behind the coup of 15 July 2016, and the other is for all the other terrorist organizations, who endanger the public order and the integrity of the state. Something that it's not something which I found particularly amusing, although I shouldn't use the word amusing in this context, is that apparently, women and children are exempted from this.
Which is almond or gray for the coup?
For the coup is almond. Okay. And it's speaking of semiotics, that would be interesting to know why almond and why gray. Why not? I don't know, blue. Why something. And so women and children, I don't know if children are involved in that, they were exempted from these measures. So for feminists, it would be, I'm sorry, I'm not sarcastic, but it would be quite interesting, to see if we could trigger an article on that, why women are exempted, from wearing uniforms. And I'm a bit sarcastic, of course, there. Also, according to the decree, those who refuse to wear the uniforms will lose their visitor privileges. Okay? So, and I have an understanding that there were several well-known figures who are under detention now who claim that they are not going to wear the uniform no matter what. Okay. But this is not the first time. While I was thinking about that, I say, is it the first time that we have? Why did it trigger me so much? Is it the first time that we had? No, we didn't have. Actually, President Erdogan said, we will do it like Guantanamo. He said, why are you so shocked? We will do there. We have, remember all of us, when we started seeing the pictures coming from Guantanamo, the orange uniforms, the people who were tied, how they were walk. But it's not the only recent history, and before I was critical of history, but I did a little bit my research on other topics, and I realized, that we had an issue with uniforms, very interesting, in Northern Ireland during the so-called Irish Troubles, And for those of you who go back into the IRA and think of that, the famous hunger strikes, in the 1981, they were actually also part of the uniform, like the hunger strikers. They say, we don't want to wear this uniform. So they started a series of strikes. First, it was the so-called blanket strike. They didn't wear anything but blankets, When they took the blankets from them, we had the dirty strike. I don't want to go there. And then it went into the hunger strike, because one of their demands, of the prisoners was that we don't want to wear this uniform. We don't want to appear with this uniform. And also, when I did a little bit of my research, I bump into the work of a Turkish researcher, I think she's a sociologist, who claimed that when she interviewed in her work a relative of a former prisoner, in southeastern Turkey, he told her that the fact that he visited his brother and he saw him during the visiting hours in his underwear only, he didn't wear any clothes, and they were just, you had the prisoners in underwear that triggered his reaction, his outrage, of seeing his older brother, who was a symbol to his eyes, like that his dignity was so so massively violated, before the eyes of a smaller kid, that look, you are weak. You do not control your body. You do not control anything, and your relatives come and visit you in the underwear. Also, very recently, to my shocking discovery, France decided to do something else, and maybe you have more information. They decided to how do we say, to apply the box for the defendants. So now there is this. It's a discussion, of course. That the defendants who appear before the court, they have to be in a glass box. I think that brings us memories. We know where it might to Eichmann, of course, the cage, and there is massive reaction also. And that was end of January, about this idea that lawyers reacted and said, but we don't have contact with the defendant. He cannot even listen to what we are saying. And also the semiotics in the courtroom, that the defendant is in a lower spot than the prosecution. It's fascinating, the semiotics. If we think of that in the courtroom, the defendant is in a lower position and the prosecution is in a higher position, and also that the defendant has no immediate direct access with his lawyer, and that's in France. And now that I remember something, is it okay? Now that I remember, Emre said, did you say or not, maybe, that France abolished, I would say, that they terminated the state of emergency? Typically, yes. But replaced it with a quasi state of emergency. We don't call it state of emergency. I think this is what why is it so important into the new practices of states of emergency. We don't name it. It's not a state of emergency, but we adopt all these extreme measures, which actually do the same thing like a state of emergency. So in France, I found it very interesting, because I'm trying to see France and Turkey. So in France, they say, okay, we don't talk about uniforms, but we talk about boxes. Why do you need a box? A glass? Yes. No, I thought. Why do you need a glass box on that? In Turkey, they say no glass boxes. Still, we don't know, but everybody has to wear a uniform because this is what it is supposed to be.
Yeah, this box is for terrorist suspects or for any criminals?
No, I think it's for everyone.
Oh, wow.
It's not uncommon. In Belarus, for example,
Yes.
there's cages.
I know cages.
Yeah, actual cages.
Belarus, they don't test penalty as well.
Yeah.
And it's outside of the Council of Europe. The only country in Europe which is not a member, but that says something on where we go. I think it's for everyone. It's not for terrorists, but I will have to. I found it so shocking that I will dig more. And please, I urge all of you, if you have, because it started a discussion. It was mainly human rights lawyers and criminal lawyers, and apart from addressing the human rights issue, they also address the practical issue that they cannot talk to the defendant properly, and also that the defendant cannot hear properly what is going. So they started it in a pilot phase, in a trial phase, but we can check whether they adopted it now. So we know after 2015, the events of the state of emergency in France, and how that has affected. It's something, actually, it's a question mark, but I think it's something that I was particularly interesting to see the difference, between France and Turkey. And also, again, for Eichmann, I would be very interested myself, to go back to that. And maybe, guys, you know more, I'm sure you know more in Israel about why was Eichmann put in this cage. Was there a discussion about that?
The glass cell.
Eichmann.
The Eichmann
The
trial.
purpose of the glass cell?
I think they
Protect
were,
him.
yeah.
To protect him.
Yeah, they were afraid
I was
of
just thinking that of people
people
I
assassinating
found
him.
myself throwing eggs at him. That's not what. you
Yeah,
want
they were
happening in a
afraid of
courtroom.
assassination, so they put him in a glass.
Mm.
Actually, I think it was higher, if I remember the setting correctly. It was not low; it was high. The glass chamber.
Yes, you're right. It was like
It was
on a
very
step.
high,
Yeah.
and he had translation, like he was sitting with these ear
Yeah, of course.
thingies.
Yeah.
They knew it would be a political trial that is not only interesting to Israelis, that the whole world is watching the relatively new Jewish country and whether or not they can make like
A proper
and just
trial, yes.
for him. So they were really, I think, cautious about also, they're very sensitive to the visuals as well.
which is fascinating as well. If we see, because I situate
Very sophisticated for the 60s.
Yeah, but
Yes,
especially. But actually, I find it. I'm trying to situate that in a historical context, and as you say,
It's a little bit ראווה, משפטי ראווה, יש לזה מונח. Political trials that are also, it's not show off, it's like something that's like, don't know the exact term, but it's like political trials. I think they have their own definition and also legal theory.
Yes, for sure. I mean, when we do all this, we talk about the importance of, especially for criminals, of that high profile,
Yep.
Definitely. But the methods also, it's very important. The methods and the semiotics and the methods being sent, because when I said before about the kids, our mind went to Eichmann, and although the purpose was quite different, of course, it was for his own protection. Still, when we talk about the defendant in a case, I didn't know about Belarus. I didn't know about other places,
It wasn't a cage. It was
No, it wasn't
like
the case. The
chamber
glass.
that was very static, if I remember it, and it was built especially for this trial. Yeah, you have. Yeah. There you are.
But we all remember that. It's a glass thing,
Yeah.
but we all remember.
Yeah.
We all remember about that. So that brings me, to my research questions, actually, and this is something, as I say, that is in a very preliminary stage. And definitely it's not a legal question per se, but I would say that it's time for us a little bit to try to link and to see, not only to do a kind of interdisciplinary research, but also to see, whether it has any legal effect. And what I want to, I'm going to explain it here. So, for example, when this presidential decree, in Turkey was adopted, President Erdogan said they will be introduced to the world like that. Okay, they will be introduced to the world like that. As lawyers here, let's say something about presumption of innocence. About the right of presumption of innocence, before they are convicted, before it's the first time, that the defendants go before a court. But already, it's the idea that we have the enemy, he has to be introduced, It's very similar, like the logic, it's very similar to what Alexandra said in a different context. They have to be introduced to the world. Imagine the images of hundreds of people, going before the court, before they are even tried, in uniforms, Yes.
Are the uniforms different for defendants and for convicts?
No.
It's the same.
It's the same.
Suspect.
It's the suspect.
No, I mean, but if you're like, once you've had your trial, do you wear a different uniform?
No.
Okay, so
But are there separate stages? Like, there's the one before you actually get indictment?
It's mainly.
Where? In Israel, you do.
Yeah, it depends on the
different stages, right? Like,
What did you say?
In Turkey, it's not the case anymore.
במשפט.
Isn't there the presumption already
מנסה לחשוב על
there
עומר
with the
פשוט.
chains and stuff?
הוא לא היה במדי אסיר במשפט.
Yes, it is. But still, I think the uniform, and this is what I'm saying, yes, of course it is. And that we had a discussion, of course we have that discussion, especially when I say the chains in Guantanamo, okay, Guantanamo was a legal hole. It was a black hole, and it is a black hole. This is somewhere. But that's what I'm saying, that Turkey is not Guantanamo, France is not Guantanamo, and what I'm trying to say is that in the current state of affairs, in this era where impression does matter, and it does matter also in the legal affairs, and this is where I'm very much problematized myself. It's not only something that we see that in the ISIS videos, of execution, but also it's in this massive scale of defendants, going before a court. Defendants still at this stage, wearing basically uniforms, what is the purpose of that? As we say, the purpose is that the world has to see them the way they really are. Okay? That means, that they cannot be innocent. in order to be imprisoned, in a pretrial detention. That means automatically that these people, they cannot be innocent, and they have no right, to the presumption of innocence, which for me it's something extremely shocking. And still, I haven't seen any reaction, by the Council of Europe. I would like to see, or the Venice Commission, maybe they haven't really realized that. But this is something that goes really, really, really to the heart of fair trial, and yes.
But won't you argue that the mere order that if you're not going to wear that, you're going to lose your visitation rights to itself, you're already harming your
exactly
rights.
Exactly. This
haven't been convicted.
No. This is something really, I wouldn't say shocking, but this is what it says. When we have this state of emergency, and we have the overall political climate and the overall idea that anything goes. So we have the Schmittian idea of the, and now Schmidt comes back, we have the Schmittian idea of the enemy there, you dehumanize your enemy who has no rights whatsoever, in advance has no rights, and someone who is dares, to criticize or to say, but what about fair trial rights, say, oh, these people cannot have that, because these people, are accused of plotting a coup d'etat against our own state, okay? So there is no way that you can have a proper, and this is my question about the judiciary, and that it was coming back and back and back according to the judiciary. To what extent, we can have proper checks and balances, if we don't have an independent judiciary, which at the end of the day, I think this is the key in all our countries. This is the problem with Hungary, this is the problem with Poland, it's a problem of Czech Republic, it's a problem of many countries. Okay, having said that, I want to talk a little bit about the impression. This is where it's the most difficult part of my work, Barbara, being a lawyer, because I'm used to my legal. Fantastic.
I'm holding down.
Fantastic, because I'm a legal scholar, as I say, and I was thinking, where should I go? And of course, I'm going into sociology. I'm going into sociology. So first, I started reading Umberto Eco, for example, the Semiotics. Yes, I see your own.
The scientist?
The scientist, yes. He wrote these books on the semiotics, But then, I continued reading about, I read another political scientist, sociologist, from the 80s, and this is Murray Edelman, which is the symbolic uses of politics. Okay, the symbolism of politics. And I'm trying to understand that in the current context, as I say, of visual digitalization, where everything immediately, is not recorded, how do we say, published, and then it triggers an immediate reaction, to the public feeling, where rationale does not work, but it's your first, reaction is the sentiment, okay? And where it's impossible to put the sentiment, and we all know that, especially in the anti-terrorist practices and measures, we don't work with they do not work based on the rationale, but they work based on the sentiment, how you want to trigger the sentiment of the public. And this is what I find particularly dangerous, and this is where I comes, as a lawyer, as a legal scholar, and having read, as I say, starting reading a little bit, and also
Bourdieu.
Yes, you see, it's getting even more. Thank you very much. I would love your suggestions. Okay, great. It's getting better. No, seriously now.
Hi, Bourdieu is right for it. If you want to talk about control on the body and control with the, his sketch with the pyramid and the what you call it?
Which one?
The prison.
Yeah.
But
the famous
she's
theory.
have to look at a lot more than just the uniform. If she's going Bourdieu, that's like there's a whole.
No,
Yeah.
crossing the line.
I have read it for another thing, so. But I would be very much interested. Okay, I would be very much interested in everybody's suggestion. My difficulty. I mean, there are many difficulties with this one. When I say the semiotics of uniform, is I'm not a sociologist. Okay, I'm not an anthropologist, and I'm not a political scientist. I'm a lawyer, but I strongly more and more in this era that anything goes, and this is what I'm afraid. The feeling that anything goes. I feel that legal scholars maybe this is very, I don't know, moralistic, maybe because I'm doing lots of ethics recently, but I think that we have a responsibility to identify not those practices like this video, for example, which was shocking, what we saw before, but the things that are the covered one, the hidden one, And the hidden one do matter because basically, they challenge fundamental legal principles we used to take for granted. And it seems, that even those fundamental principles are in crisis. And this is not in Turkey, which is, I repeat, I think it's an exceptional case, regarding its rule of law state for many years. But when we have it in countries of the Council of Europe or of the European Union, that they even think or consider, taking those measures, then there is something that we have to, I wouldn't say shout, but we have a responsibility, and this is why I believe it was not only the image, but it was the feeling that this image, basically violates the essence of criminal law, at least as I was taught 20 years ago, or as I practice as a criminal lawyer myself. And this is very, very important to leave it just to other disciplines or to journalists or to say, okay, yes, but at least they go before a judge. Okay, they go before a judge. Okay, they may wear a uniform, they go before a judge. So typically, the prerequisites, let's say, of fairness, of the fair trial standards, although it's not that case, have been fulfilled. And while I was coming here, on the plane, I thought, okay, this is where I have to go back. So, Barbara, do you agree with this one? No, not even with this.
I have no substantial knowledge of it. So
yeah, it's a famous book by John Berger, Ways of Seeing. And it's a fantastic book where he died recently, but where he analyzes how our presumptions of everything, that we see things based on our presumption of things, based on our taste, based on everything. This is also the work of Mary Edelman. So basically here at the end of the book it says, exploring the layers of meaning within photographs and graphic art. Berger argues that when we see, we are not just looking, we are reading the language of images. We are reading the language of images. So from this language of images, I want to go back to the legal language. And I'm trying, to connect these two types of languages. And why I'm getting so obsessed recently with images, when we say the uniform, by images I mean a photograph, I mean a video, I mean all these things, is that because a couple of months ago, in Helsinki, we had a conference in a different context, and I told that I was shocked about some images like the Syrian child who drowned in Mediterranean. Okay, Alan Kurdi, who drowned. And I had the feedback that you should be careful about images. Okay, you should be careful about images, and you should be careful, which I agree, you should be careful about these. The sentiments they trigger, which, first of all, you should be suspicious about images. This is a question that Barbara or you were asking before, who was behind these videos, how they were circulated, where they found when we heard about the American intelligence, So again, we have to be very particular about the instrumentalization and the propagation, the propagation of images, but we cannot avoid the images, and in the era where everything, is out there in this global village, I think more and more, we have to deal with moral and legal issues about the images. I'm not saying that we should regulate it in a new legal framework. I'm saying that we cannot ignore that we live in a reality where politicians, scholars, everyone, can produce a particular impression that goes into the fundamental understandings, of legal protection. And this is where I started reading John Berger. This is where I started reading all the sociologists. And I read also our Greek compatriot, Douzinas, Law and Aesthetics. Aesthetics, because it's everything about aesthetics, and I'm trying to understand whether we live in a different era or whether there is something else now based on these new technologies, whether we are in a different era, and to what extent, all these technological tools that we have of immediate production, to what extent actually affect the way we think of state of emergencies, the way we think about counterterrorism. It's not a resolution. I'm not talking about Security Council resolution. We don't have a Cadi argument, It's not this, but it's something which is not irrelevant, from the core of I don't want to call Western. That's very Eurocentric and colonialist and everything, but of the core of our legal education, what we understood. And as I keep telling you, this is a very early stage, because more and more, as a member of the International Law Association now, I work on these issues of state of emergencies and how they affect, particular groups, vulnerable groups in particular. And the impression, this word that is stuck in my mind, impression matters. More and more I realize how important it is, when we don't realize as lawyers, but also the thing that how we read the first impression, that at the end of the day, everything is basically, based on our presumptions and pre-feelings and our inclinations, about how do we read someone who is in a uniform, okay, and he's standing trial for orchestrating or participating in a coup d'etat which was planning to overthrow a democratically elected government. And I forgot, I want to say something else. Ido, yes.
Sorry.
No. Yes,
two-
I remember. I did.
Two things. One, methodological.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out if you're going from the discussion of images to the specific cases, test case of Turkey,
Or the other.
or the other way around. And
Yeah,
on
that's
the
a good point.
importance of images, in the Israel Democracy Institute, Ami Ayalon
Mhm.
was doing was working there, is also related to University of Haifa. Has been talking in the last, I think, 5 years about the importance of the images in our conflicts.
Okay.
So that in the past it used to be until the first disproportionate damage, like the big situation of a lot of civilians got killed. Now it's the race to the first bad image, like the image you can send, and that will.
That's
allow
interesting.
to
Thank you so
avoid
much.
The
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah, this is so okay. The other scholar I started reading is Roland Barthes, of course, on mythologies, and the idea that mythologies about the semiotics, that we think that we see something and we just have our first reaction, which is not true. Basically, based on all the things that pre-exist in us according to our taste, and everything. And this is something that I'm working. But the methodological issue is so important. Actually, Don, thanks a lot for that. And I'm telling you, I'm still struggling. From one side, I don't want to confine it to Turkey, because I believe and I sense that we have different examples, different paradigms, and if I research more, I'm going to see. I will be not shocked. I'm sure I'm going to see more things. We have also Venezuela, which is a very interesting case study. To see what's going on there. So I don't want to be someone who focuses only on Turkey. On the other hand, I acknowledge, that the issue of images is so broad and so multi-layered, so it's I know it's a massive task and it has to be narrowed down, and this is something that I'm trying to, that's why I said I'm trying to see to what extent, images within a particular state of, maybe I can start as a case study, because I was particularly surprised by the uniform thing. You tell me, but why not Guantanamo? Because I say Guantanamo was I find it maybe I want your opinion on that. Why are you surprised now? And I was surprised with Guantanamo. I was even more surprised with Abu Ghraib, the pictures from Abu Ghraib, the prison in Iraq. I would say even more than the torture in Abu Ghraib and the hoods. Remember, at that time than Guantanamo. But my concern is to what extent, because we are bombarded with all these views, images daily, that we become, I would say, accustomed to that. We have been so immune that we can see a body, we can see everything, and then we can continue talking about something else, which is how life goes, and we are human beings. But on the other hand, when it comes to this is where it's not a sociological pure exercise. It's when it comes, as lawyers, as a practitioner, as a scholar, as someone who teaches people, I think that, I'm not here to invent the wheel for sure, but there are so many questions. To what extent, especially, fair trial rights, can be sacrificed, will be sacrificed, and I think that we have to speak out and somehow, try to identify what is the real problem over there. Really, I find it, there are so many differences, there's what the French do. I have to look more on that, as you say, is that for terrorism or is for all the defendants? There must be a logic behind that. I don't see, but for example, the first impression for me was, of course, Eichmann. That actually, a couple of years ago, there was this exhibition, at the Museum of Israel, Tel Aviv University. It was the Eichmann exhibition where basically, they exhibited all the things that were used remember, including the box. So it happened to be at Tel Aviv University, and I walked in, and it was it was amazing, not fantastic, but it was like they gave even the gloves of the agents, who abducted him in Buenos Aires, and the fake car plates, they used in Buenos Aires, they had everything, and then they had even the glass box. So this image is stuck in my mind, that this was the first thing of Eichmann. The second thing was Hannah Arendt, of course, on Eichmann, but the image is so important. So this is where I'm saying, that maybe, we shouldn't leave it only to sociologists or to people who do aesthetics, but we should see, to what extent this tendency, inclination, to what extent, how can we protect, how can we create a filter, a protection filter around what we used to consider to be fundamental. And that's my very early thoughts, very chaotic. Methodologically speaking, yes, you are right. I still don't know, but I can tell you, I don't want to confine it only on Turkey. I don't, but I feel more and more that it requires very fine exercise of identifying the differences, of, as I say, what is Guantanamo, what is France, what was the IRA, what is Turkey, what is... On the other hand, we have some common things, okay? So there are differences, but there are these common things: security. So this is something that I'm trying to look for. Thanks for that, Barbara, please.
Okay, can I throw very different things at you?
Please do. This is what I want.
So the first thing that really confused me when I read the title, I was expecting something about military uniforms, and that is because
interesting.
And I'm being confused by the title still now, because I consider the wearing of a uniform as a privilege. It is someone, if you think about it,
then you see an Israeli idea.
I mean, the uniform is the baseline to assign a certain status, but it's usually a status that comes with some sort of privilege. A soldier has privileges over a civilian. The privileges as in something is different about him, and it's something that's additional. It's not something that's less.
I'm doing a PhD on the fact that their right to life is lower than the right to life of a civilian. I mean, there is a price to being uniform.
Okay, but okay, maybe it's debatable whether it's truly a privilege. Maybe the situation.
A privilege in the sense of like it's an honor, like you're proud of.
No, for protection you meant, right? No, protection or status.
It's an obligation. If you're obliged, then it's less than free to do whatever you
need. As some sort of positive amendment to the status that you were in before. Like you're taking a step.
Okay.
It's a sort of self-conscious step that you're taking.
Yeah.
Whereas for the for the defendant or the suspect, it's not a positive state. It's something that's taken for him. So, but maybe it's clearer if I rephrase it. I think what you're interested so much is the uniform itself, but the process of being assigned and forced to uniformity. It's about the uniformity of them and about the fact that this process is not a self-conscious decision, but that it's something that's being assigned.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what was implicit when I thought about uniforms. I was thinking about the military. I was thinking about policemen. I was also thinking about judges. They just don't go. They don't go into court in their
True,
jeans.
very true.
And there's some sort of dress code that you always have.
Can we start? Can I respond to that? This is like really. I understand how. I mean, we are lawyers. We think the uniform, especially we do IHL, International Humanitarian Law. Yes, exactly. Like experts here, we think in a different way about the implications of the uniform. But I think your reference by mentioning that it's something helpful a little bit, to go back and see why the difference between the military uniform and this civilian uniform. And for me, I think what was bothering was this homogeneity, this uniformity, as you say, that means, that deprives people of their individuality, and especially at the stage of being a defendant.
Yes.
Because we have uniforms in American prisons, we have uniforms in many prisons. They don't go, but it's these days, and not only the uniform you wear in the prison, but the uniform you're supposed to wear when you go before the court, when the audience, the common people, when you are exposed to the people. The idea that the people have to see how you really are. It's not how the perception. It's not like the uniforms you wear, in the as I say, within the prison, which is very normal practice. I'm not saying about that. But it's this thing that you step out of the prison, and you have to wear a uniform, and this defendant at this early stage. And frankly, speaking of uniform, I was always afraid of uniforms, because for me, uniforms meant always authority, and I was always afraid of authority. But that's another. But this is a great. This is a point of difference. I see why. So it's interesting that you thought that the semiotics will be the semiotics of military uniform.
Yeah, or police or something. I was thinking about a positive additional assignment of attributes to the person, and rather than a deprivation. Because with the soldier puts on the uniform and he is conscious of the process of putting on the uniform. Even if he gets drafted, there's the opportunity for him to run away or to not show up or to simply not put on the uniform.
And be put in jail for that.
So it has consequences. But the process itself would be possible.
Everything is possible.
No, okay.
And this is the conclusion of this 2-week work. So
I don't get that. Where are you going with? If something is, you say it has an alternative, it means that the alternative is legal. If the alternative means that you will go to between jail and up to be hung for treason, that's not a real option. If your options are being military or being jail, I don't think that's much of an option.
True. Okay, so maybe I had a misconception here. Probably.
yeah, but it's the broader thing of uniform. It's something really that first I think I would like to read a little bit to see what I can find in that state. Also, when I mentioned that to a friend of mine, a professor, he told his mind went directly to the Star of David. It didn't go. My mind didn't go there. He mentioned, so it's like the star. Yeah, he says it's like the Star of David, and then I was thinking about the plurality of Hannah Arendt's idea of the human condition, and going back, to this homogeneity, and the deprivation of your
Self.
Yeah, which goes back to human dignity. also, so when I said I don't want to deal with human dignity, of course, it's intertwined with human dignity and all the work by Waldron and other moral theories, about human dignity. Sorry.
And then two things that about the sort of practicalities. So with Guantanamo, it makes sort of sense for the inmates to be wearing something orange, so you simply see them when they try to run away. So I mean
yes,
there is a practical purpose to that. Though I'm not so sure that when that decision was made in Turkey, or when that decision is made in general, whether whoever makes that decision is fully conscious of all the symbolic consequences, or whether the symbolic consequences even play a big role in his decision, or whether there's... So I'm saying, as an observer who's sort of considering the entire context, you're bound to see a lot of more things exposed than the person does when they're making the decision, or when a collective takes that decision. And I also think there might be, I mean, as you said, and that I found that quite interesting, that there's a difference between an almond and a grey uniform. So I was thinking, okay, so something's got to be different about these two, but also, why is one orange and why is one grey, and why would another one be striped? Is there something like a cultural color coding? Would there be something about specific areas of the world where different colors mean something different?
Yeah, that's also very
like
important.
numbers have different.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
there was
color
public procurement for grey and almond
And
jumpsuits.
and if I
could
might,
be the case also.
and if I can
Yes,
add,
please.
someone that's living with a graphic designer for many years.
That's very helpful.
So that's a very complicated question, because the thing with colors, it's a cultural code. In there's a few layers to that. The first one is religious, different meanings of different situations.
It's only the green, I think.
Brown and grey. So
Yeah, it's not the green for the...
That's if you're going to stay with that.
Yeah.
That example, if you're not looking at other countries.
Sure.
But you don't know that yet. So
Yeah, sure.
So the question of colors, and it's a little bit of theory of I don't even know where they studied in the arts. I think, like there's a whole research field of the
Yeah, you're right.
connection between colors and emotions.
Yes.
And the reason, like in political campaigns, they talk about it a lot. Like if you want to create something that's a positive message, and what you're gonna do, like if you want to do something negative, then you use red, and you want to do something
Exactly.
positive. And then there are national colors, like the colors of a flag, are very symbolic in a country.
Yeah.
And the thing with colors, it's a very different field than ours. It's, I think, somewhere in between design and art and political labeling, and
But not law.
and psychology. No, it's not legal, but it's not very complicated either.
Yeah.
Like,
But you know what I think? It's very true. White, brown, and gray, because they're both dark. They're dark and dark.
But that's what you think.
Yeah, but
That's what I think.
No,
but
but there are some
I don't
normative
know.
theories, like truth, like
But that work globally.
Well, dark and gray are brown and gray are
there are
dark colors in principle.
psychological researches about colors, like red. There's the reason that most political campaigns in the world will be with red and black, and red is the color of blood. And there's a reason for that. I'm
That's
not an
true.
expert, but there are like white
Red and blue, you're
in-
right, yeah.
and it's a cultural code, like in Western world, like white is connected with angels, and it's like there are psychological researches on it's the word of associations and connotations. Sorry?
I'm sorry.
I guess that also.
Didn't mean the interruption.
No, it's like they really did like
No, it's
there's
true. There is
a huge
research, a
field,
massive
like
research, of course.
associations and connotations
Yeah,
of
yeah, of
people,
colours.
cultures,
But I
of
mean,
groups.
in the Turkish case, I don't think that decision was a well-thought decision, because as a Turkish citizen, I know how state of affairs are going in Turkey. So it was the first time, I guess, President Erdogan himself, made such a declaration that because basically what he's trying to do now, he's trying to take down all network of Gülen movement. I mean, not just in Turkey but also abroad. So that's why he wants to introduce those people to the world.
But I'm right.
But when it comes to choosing, you're picking up the color almond gray. I don't think that there is a reference, or
But-
in Turkish culture, or in Islamic
Yeah,
religion.
but
I have no idea.
Can I say something? For me, it goes beyond who were behind the plot or what it is. It was true, that the first T-shirt, say hero. I mean, already worked. There was this impression, and they knew, of course, that if defendants keep coming into the court, saying hero, of course, this is the power of the image. Okay,
So
That's
didn't
the
they
power of the
respond
word, not
uniform with the
not
uniform?
image.
Sorry.
So that's the power of the word, not the image.
Yeah, but the word as an image, how it is.
But it's. That's
But if he
different.
said but if he said, "I'm a hero" without wearing the T-shirt, would it be the same?
But that will be a uniform again.
But you don't.
No, but that's the
if
visual.
You heard it, it was.
It's the visual thing, guys. That's what I'm saying.
No,
that
but okay. I think maybe the question is if he'd come up, he sit in court and pull up this piece of paper,
Yeah.
and do this, and it would say hero.
Yeah.
Would it be the same or not?
Well, I think my understanding is that if you give a visual sign, that it's much different than giving an oral sign. Yeah, but
It's
no.
different, no. But if it's a word, the way your brain processes
Like
it
Me
is
Too.
different.
Okay, the
And the thing
campaign.
is
Me
the
Too. That's a good
permanence
example.
of the word.
It's not the
Because by
color.
virtue of it being part of the permanent picture,
Yeah.
the word acquires permanence, but it is itself a word, and it's being
Yeah.
processed in your brain as a word, not
Yes.
as an image.
Yeah,
Do you
the
think
Me
that-
Too campaign is a great example. It's
Do you
not about the
think that
color.
T-shirt
Yes.
was just a chance? or
No, it was
plan?
on purpose. Of
Of
course,
course.
it was on
It's just
purpose.
like
That's what we
writing it.
say. It was not like that.
It's the
This
sense.
guy didn't. It was a purpose, And I understand what is the logic behind you say, And there are different terrorist groups, that under now. That's why they're two different, categories. One is for the terrorist groups, which is considered allegedly to be behind the coup, and the other one is for all the other terrorist groups. And this goes into how broad the state of emergency and all the measures is. Most likely there is no. It was this idea. It was a punishment idea. Also, it was a punishment. That imagine if you had thousands of people showing up, in the court with this. It means that you don't control anything, and you want to control everything.
It's control and respect.
It's totally controlling.
And respect also. I think it's a way to
Yeah.
educate people. You come to a place, you have to respect it. And one of the
Exactly.
I want to ask you, you said you're not taking it to regulation. So where do you take it? Suppose you say, okay.
You mean the legal regulation when I said, where do I take it? What I meant by legal regulation, I meant that I don't think we need more law. That's what. I don't think that the answer is always more law, more law. I think we have to go a step backwards, and to see how can we, oh my God, how can I frame? No, I can frame it that it's something that comes all the time in my work recently. The idea that things we take for granted. We have to fight for the obvious. The obvious we consider 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. The obvious changes. I think the obvious is less and less. Not only in counter-terrorism, but in broader issues of human liberty. So my sentiment here, is that I feel that there is a danger, There is a danger back to the basic, and the basic is, what I would call it, the human dignity based in the fair trial understanding. And I don't think that we need more legal regulation, but that we have to raise awareness, the danger, we have to highlight, to set light into this danger, and then we have to see what is the problem behind that. And maybe we need something to do legally, but I don't feel that we have to jump into prohibition. For example, I don't think that. But we have them. How is it called? We have the principles on human dignity for prisoners. We have the minimum principles. But what is Siracusa? Are they
Siracusa, that's.
Are they the
principles.
Siracusa principles or not? The Siracusa
There
is for the
UN
derogatory.
basic human treatment of
No,
prisoners.
Mandela. It's called the Mandela principles. when Nelson Mandela was under, can someone double check? It's called the Nelson Mandela principles, of basic treatment, minimum treatment of prisoners, So we have soft law. So also here, this issue touches upon the broader questions also, that's about the hard law and the soft law, and goes back into the whole discussion, to what extent, even when we have legally binding norms, to what extent we can deal with these issues which are more than law. So
That's
from one side,
United Nations standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners.
Yes.
Nelson Mandela rules.
Exactly, Nelson Mandela rules. So from one side, I'm trying to say these are the limits of law. From the other side, I'm saying there is a core of law, and I don't know. And there is always, this kind of, I wouldn't say conflict, but there is always this ambiguity, I feel that we need to protect the legal core, acknowledging that it's beyond law, and then maybe we need a stronger proclamation. Maybe I was wrong when I say yes, Sophia. Maybe I was wrong when I say at the first stage no legal regulation. But usually our response to everything is more law, and I don't think that we are. And I feel that we are in an era where, if we had, maybe you disagree, if we had to negotiate now basic legal instruments that were negotiated in the 50s and 60s, now we wouldn't be able to reach an agreement. So this is the tricky part, okay? So, but these are very interesting questions for me to think more, and you see that I also contradict, yes, Sophia, myself. And then Barbara is...
I want to speak as well.
Well,
did.
lady, Sophia hasn't said a word, so the floor is yours.
I will speak as a lawyer.
Oh yes, and we want that.
The corners and the semiotics, because I have no idea about these things. When you said about boxes, images that came to my mind because the Ocalan trial,
Yeah.
I think it was in a box. The trial of President Morsi in Egypt.
Yes, you're right, Morsi. You are right, very much in a cage. No, it was. It was.
I even have. I might be mistaken, but even before the International Criminal Court, like
there is a glass. Yeah, but this is for protection in principle.
So yeah, what I was about to say is that whether actually you have to distinguish.
Yeah, you're right.
Because when you have boxes, actually there might be another reason.
Very true.
That it might be about security. And you might want to, as I said, to distinguish or even just to flag this up.
No, this is a very good observation actually, and the idea that I say about the French law before, which I don't know if it's a drafting whatever it is, but it's very true that they're like, I asked about Eichmann and immediately came security, so this is a very fine distinction that has to be, as I say, it's a different thing. I still think it's different thing. Guantanamo, it's different thing. IRA, it's different thing. But maybe there is this common chord, there is a pattern of thinking of behind security and the further securitization, so this is something, but this is, totally.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Sorry.
So I took the moderator also role, as you can say. Yes. Okay. What else are you going to give me? I'm kidding. Yes.
The other thing I would do again, if you decide to do some legal research, the Ocalan trial, for example, before the European Court of Human Rights, there was discussion about the right to a fair trial.
Yeah.
And it was about the independence of the court, but maybe there is something submitted by Ocalan about the way he was put in a cage or something, and how this might have affected the right to a trial. And the other thing that I would examine again as a lawyer is maybe whether there is any research on trials by jury and how uniform might actually affect
That's very interesting.
the jury, and because they see someone
Very
in
interesting.
uniform, they might immediately think that, oh, he's a criminal.
Yeah, exactly. Civilians, laymen, common people, who don't have our understand. I'm not saying that we are so great, but we are not lawyers in general, but at least we understand the fair trial, right? A little bit more.
So yeah, I mean,
This is a
in
great
terms
point,
of
actually.
legal research, I mean, even the European Court of Human Rights, it might be something that has been discussed as part of
That's
that.
the
I'm
most
sure this
important
case,
point.
this
That's-
one will go to the. I think the uniform case will.
There might have already been something out there that has been touched upon, even if there
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
a
yeah.
violation, but something that the court has considered. But definitely for jury trials.
Yeah, this is so fascinating because, of course, you're right. In the United States, we see defendants
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
right. Exactly. I remember O.J. Simpson.
That's
Yeah, the famous O.J. He was with a uniform.
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, he was with a uniform in the courtroom.
It's not only with the jury. It's if I can connect to what
Yeah.
to what Sophia said.
We'll
That's
have also the
I
floor.
agree with Sophia. I think this is the most important thing here. It's not only the jury. It's also like the image, the press image, the photo that's being
But
published.
the jury is particular also. You are very right because it addresses civilian audience. Civilian, you understand?
Those who make the decision.
Yes, and they are the yeah. So it's not legal lawyers, you know.
It's true, but in public trials there is a significance to public opinion as well.
of course. But
So
this is what is
image and this. You take a person, especially in political trials.
Yeah.
Like you take, if our example, you take a prime minister, you take someone that's, or O.J. Simpson, a celebrity. You put them in an orange uniform, and you took the air out of his public image and out of his celebrity, and you've just
this is the
reduced him
idea.
like 10 levels.
Yeah, I mean, even the Human Rights Committee might have communication.
Yeah, you're right. The Human Rights Committee. Yeah.
Touched upon it and it hasn't been-
I'll ask you, Val. No, it's true. It's true. But it's wow. Image matters. When people told me that, I was like, image matters.
Image is everything.
So,
And first impression even more, whether we like it or not.
so it's two things. One's a uniform versus box, and the other one is about practice
Wait,
theory.
uniform versus box?
Uniform versus box. I think there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Very practically speaking, the uniform is closer to the human body, and
Mm-hmm.
the uniform does not change the physical positionality in the room,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the box does.
Yeah.
And I guess that handcuffs are somewhere in between.
That's true.
So that there's different things that depending on how close or how far away from the person's body, and also where in relation to the audience the thing is, or where the audience is in relation to whatever thing is being changed.
Mm-hmm.
Because the box is going to have a different effect on me watching through the telly than it would have to someone sitting in the back of the courtroom, and it has another different
True.
effect on whoever is sort of in the front.
Very true.
And the other thing is, the reason I was sort of smirking when you said Bourdieu is so, yeah. I'm thinking practice theory, and I'm thinking practice theory can work for a range of things, but I think it will not work if you're going to look at legal consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ontological baseline between the law and between practice theory and Bourdieu and whoever else you want to put in that corner is so entirely different that I do not see a methodology in which you can cross that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
I
No,
really
thank
think,
you, though.
I think it could be you could write two different papers, one about the sort of the imagery and another one about legal consequences, but don't connect them because it will go down really badly with whoever is doing social theory.
Mm. But is it just because of the Bourdieu, or generally not connect them? What do you say?
I don't know all of these. I don't know all the authors in that sort of area, but I think the problem is that if you look at the world from that sort of constructivist point of view, you will have a very hard time determining causal relationships, which you are looking for if you're a lawyer. If you're looking at the consequences, the legal consequences of something, it means you're looking at a causal relationship, and you're not going to find it.
Well, I'm telling you that doing interdisciplinary research in the past and the causation was always the trickiest part, and I agree. And I know that when you try to write something on images, and it's not the first time, I'm telling you. I mean, Kostas Douzinas has written on law and aesthetics a lot, there is a massive book on that. You're not going to please any audience. At the end of the day, you're the loser. The writer is the loser because you do. Yeah, unless you do that. And this is something that I have to think a lot and exercise. I agree, it's a personal thing, but it's something that, because triggered my passion, it's something that I don't want to leave it, and I don't want to leave it just, yeah, of course, I'm a lawyer and I'm not going to do that, but I find the image more and more bothers me, yes, not bothering me, but bothers me. Like lately, I was reading, for example, Susan Sontag on photography and the image, and I'm trying to understand. I'm reading, stuff which are outside my knowledge for, like Susan Sontag, photographer, like maybe Susan Sontag because of Leibovitz, but still, I'm trying to understand things that I have never touched upon, and that started basically by how we react to misery, how we react to catastrophe, how we react to the pain of the others. And Susan Sontag has written about that, about the pain of the... Sorry?
Light Sunday reading.
Yeah, light Sunday morning reading in a branch thing, like the pain of the others. And I acknowledge the danger there. But still, by saying, "Oh, it's a dangerous, tricky issue," I'm not responding to you. This is my self-reflection. It's a dangerous, tricky issue that you fall into a trap. Blah blah blah. The image is so powerful, and it's powerful in every aspect of daily life, and also of policy making, of policy decision, and now you feel also of judgment, and I'm talking about legal judgment. This is where I feel that it goes into first of all the broader judgment, and then into the core, the legalistic hardcore of judgment. That's my feeling.
So if you're
be honest.
I would not go down that road. I think that the two areas are so different in the way they see the human being, in scientific rules they apply to creating knowledge, in the ways they deduce knowledge, in the ways they analyze. I really don't think it's gonna work. But what I can see working is psychology. Because psychology, even though it works with introspection, that's what it's based on, basically. So you do make assumptions, but you're aware of the status of your assumptions and that they are assumptions only. The way that meaning is generated in that realm is, to my interpretation, closer to legal scholarship, and I think you will probably already find a lot of things there on the psychological impact of colors, on the psychological impact of uniforms, on the psychological impact of spatial setups. Things like that might be a bit closer.
Yeah, maybe because also I'm thinking about my main background, which is international criminal law, and the idea that I have to deal, with massive, these so-called trials, and there again the perception is very important. Maybe, I think I can find stuff from there which is not in the context of counter-terrorism, but it's very, I wouldn't say similar, but we are talking about that scale of trial, where we know how it works in the courtroom. Of course we know, and it's not what we say, but how it's the behavior and it's the image. But thanks for that. Really, it's something I have to think more in which direction I'm going to go.
This is only my opinion. It's obviously restricted, and there's a reason why I'm not working with Bourdieu.
I'm just reading. Now I'm pick and choose and trying to see where fits. what is going to make more sense to me, so I'm reading so many different things that lawyers usually don't read like this, but I think it's very refreshing.
Right, so you're enjoying it. So
Yeah, I do enjoy.
that's
I do
good.
enjoy because it makes me think more. But I appreciate very much your comments, and I see there is a trap, and I don't want to fall into the trap. And this is something that
With interdisciplinary research,
there's always.
That's
yeah,
the way it
yeah.
is.
the lawyers really criticize the society.
Yeah, it's going to be smashed, but
There's definitely
but-
academic journals that publish very good interdisciplinary
Yeah,
research.
yeah, yeah.
Environmental
Yeah,
research.
but it's true that there are limits in the interdisciplinary, and I think you have to acknowledge your limits when you undertake interdisciplinary, and I appreciate also.
Well, you just don't want it to jeopardize
Yeah.
the validity of your outcomes
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a degree that nobody's going to know.
But it's not an empirical. I understand. I don't know what it is, no, I don't know what it is. But I think there is something there, because I feel when something bothers you, and it bothered me first as a lawyer, it didn't bother me just as someone, it bothered me first as a lawyer, as a criminal lawyer. I thought, really?
Things wrong.
Yeah. Then I think yes. Do we have you?
Yeah, we have.
No.
I already forgot.
No.
Okay, I'll start. I really think you're onto something. I think there's a great core there, and I'm going to tell you just a few thoughts that I have. I don't know if that's what you're going to do at the end or you're interested of doing, but well, the first thing, I don't think you're only saying image matters.
Matters, yeah.
I think you're saying something that's more profound and more wide. I think it's not only that image matters, it's you want to talk about what is the meaning of a particular image and the psychology of it. And I think the first thing I was thinking about is the words or the way you're gonna phrase your argument are really important,
Yeah, yeah.
because there is a very wide spectrum there,
Yeah.
starting from, I don't know, very relatively mild descriptions like, what are we doing when we're putting someone in a uniform?
Yeah.
What are we doing? We're doing the personalizing, we're doing labeling, political labeling or
Mhm.
different labeling, or we're doing othering, or we're doing dehumanization. We're doing. You need to think when you're.
What is
I
it?
think when you're phrasing your argument, that's like the baseline. That's the core, and I'm not sure what the answer is, and maybe it's more of
Yeah,
these things.
yeah.
But I think when you think about that, you need to. In a way, it's all of these things.
Mhm.
But the question is, what are you arguing, and in which cases?
Mhm.
I think if you're talking about terrorism laws, maybe the more accurate argument would be that the first thing that we're doing is not only creating, like, we're stripping someone from their personal identification, we're doing more than that. We're doing othering. We're
Yeah,
labeling them, we're doing political
Yeah,
labeling,
yeah.
and I think that's the first thing. The second thing, I think there are theoretical questions there that are very interesting, and I think it should go to a comparative direction. And within that sphere, I think it would be interesting to look at several things. The first, to look at different countries and to see where do the uniform come in the legal process.
Mhm.
Is it happening in the beginning? Is it happening
Yeah.
only after we die? Does it happen only when we're and it's interesting because it has a meaning. When do we? The assumption, the basic question is, when do we label the person? When do we have a legal interest, a political or public interest to label a person? To
Because
other
it's
it?
different stages. You're
Yeah.
right. The political,
and
the legal,
process
and
is a long
public.
thing, and I think
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
very important constitutional
Yeah.
question. Institutional question.
Institution,
When
yeah.
when do we want to label a person?
Yeah, you're right.
And it's gonna be a different. It's gonna vary from one country to the other.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to ask why and where, and that's the first question. So it's different stages of the legal
label,
process.
yeah.
It's different countries. and its different offenses.
Yeah, of
I
course.
think it would be really interesting to ask if we're looking at if your basic assumption that it's somewhere in the area of othering, labeling, dehumanization, whatever, then it's going to be really interesting to see where do you apply it. In all legal procedures, only in terrorism, criminal law, civil law, to see the differences. I think you're going to get, if I connect to what Barbara asked, if you're looking for a methodological way out of the serious question, this might be a way out. Because if you can prove that, for example, in certain offenses, like terrorism offenses, you put someone in a uniform to start before you indict them, and in general criminal law you do it afterwards, that's a good argument. Like, that's a good way of convincing new theory.
Thank you so much. This public, legal, and political labeling, I think it's so exciting, and I think it goes into the core of the labeling, and
that's the most interesting thing here,
I think it's it's a great thing. There's different stages, when do you, at the different stages when you label the,
and the question when is because of it's a nexeret
Derivative.
derivative, yeah.
of the question why.
Oh,
If you can answer the question why, then you
when.
know the when. Like the when and the why are connected.
When and why.
I think that's the smart thing about it. 'Cause
Wow, תודה רבה, all of you. That was great, really. Thank you. You tolerated a very primitive, how can I say, expression of thoughts with me. Unfortunately, I don't have the timing now because of other projects. I have to work up to August, to properly deal with that. But there is so much more. There is something, I think there is.
It's a good
But
thing.
all the comments were so helpful because basically, it's the direction, it's the research question, it's the methodology, the trap, not Trump. I was about to say Trump. I keep saying Trump all the time
Trump,
recently.
that's right.
Are we still broadcasting? Good. It's getting better and better. So where is the trap question? But it's and I'm sure that criminologists, for example, of course, they have massively done that, but usually we don't deal with. Anyway, international human rights scholars, we don't.
And maybe one last comment in connection with what Sophia said. I think it's going to be important to differ between the different actors and the influence on them. And it's going to be very important.
So when, how, why, and who?
And who? Yeah, like every detective story. Like who does it affect and how? And that's also maybe your methodological solution. Because if you're looking at how is the public affected, so you're more in the area of media. And if you're looking at jury or judges, then you're more in like legal theory or professional and non-professional legal actors. And it's important to differ.
Thank you. So it's not only military uniforms, but uniforms. It's good. I have to tell you, when my mind went, it didn't even cross the military uniforms. But it's so there is something so obvious, and you don't even think of that because I was not thinking.
It's not about military.
Because I have the other idea of military uniform is, the humanitarian law idea of order and, anyway.
I wore a school uniform for years.
Yeah, you see, I have a problem with uniforms in principle. Okay, I stop there,
Do you get detention for not wearing it properly? Yeah?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Wow.
We are not still live? Yes, we are. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Thank you, Maria.
תודה רבה, all of you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. תודה.